Hello, in this lesson, we're going to talk about making changes to your Sunday Keys workspace. Now, Sunday Keys appears finished. It appears pretty put together, but it's important to keep in mind that it's a main stage template. So you still have all of the possibilities that any other main stage concert provides. You can literally drag and drop anything, anywhere. You can change the color of pretty much anything. You can change what pretty much anything does. So I thought we'd do a video that explains some of the ways that you can start to make tweaks to Sunday Keys. In this video, we're going to talk about changes and modifications you can make that are both practical and functional, and then some that are more aesthetic, like the appearance of the template. First, we'll talk about how to add a second keyboard, then we'll talk about how to add some additional controls to Sunday Keys, and then lastly, we'll talk about how to change the color scheme to make it your own. All right, the first thing to do is do a save as, so that you can always go back to your Start Here or Set Builder concert, or whatever your default starting point concert has been named. So we're going to go to File and choose Save As, and I'm just going to name it Modified Start Here, and I'm going to save it to my Sunday Keys folder. So again, this just creates a duplicate of my base starting point concert so that I don't have to make those assignments that we did at the beginning of using Sunday Keys again. But if I make a mistake, or if I want to be able to go back to my concert as it was, I can do so by just loading the original concert file. All right, so first let's add a second keyboard to Sunday Keys. I'm going to go over here to Layout Mode. And so you've got a lot of space here at the bottom to be able to add in a second keyboard. But the one thing you need to look out for, if you watch the Tonic Automator video, then you might know what I'm about to go for here. I'm clicking on each of these four options down here: the pitch bend, the mod wheel, the keyboard, and the sustain pedal, while holding Command on my keyboard. And this selects them all, and then I'm able to drag them up like this. Underneath, you'll see these buttons and controls right here, and this is what powers the Tonic Automator functionality in Sunday Keys. Now, if you've decided you don't want to use Tonic Automator, and you never will in the concert that you're working on, then you can delete these controls. You can delete all of them down here, and then that's just fine. It's not a big deal. It won't mess up anything else in the template. You just won't be able to use Tonic Automator. But if you want to use Tonic Automator and you want to add a second keyboard, then this is just something that you need to keep in mind as you move things around to make sure that these buttons stay intact. It doesn't matter where they are in your template, just that they're on screen so that you can use them to make Tonic Automator work. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you may have not watched the Tonic Automator video yet, so go check that one out. All right, now, for now, we want to move this keyboard right here. So we want to move it down to this corner to make a little bit of room for another keyboard over on the right side of the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this keyboard, and I'm going to shrink it up. I'm just going to make it small, like that. It's still got the same number of keys, it's just kind of tiny now. And I'm going to do the same thing with these controls, make them smaller too. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the sustain pedal. I'm just clicking and dragging on a corner and then shrinking it up. So now we've got this smaller keyboard here. But the problem that you're going to run into is now that it's not going to cover all of these controls. So we're going to kind of put this in the corner here, but it's not going to cover all the controls that we need. So you could either leave it big enough to cover all of these, or you could select them all by clicking on them while holding Command. And you can see if you can shrink them up any more. They're about as small as they can get, but we can move them over here, and then you can move the labels as well. And to be honest, if you've already done the work of setting up Tonic Automator, you don't necessarily need these text labels anymore, or you could select them and make them very, very, very small. So you could change the font size to 3 or 5, something that's just big enough for you to be able to make out what it is if you really need to. Or if you've already mapped them all, set them all up, then you could just delete the text. And I think that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to click on the text here and delete it. Because once you've set up Tonic Automator, as long as you don't mess with IAC bus or anything ever again, then you don't ever need to get back into it. So the next thing I'm going to do then is just shrink these up as much as possible. Make it real tiny. And again, this is one of the big reasons that we did create that duplicate concert, so that we can sort of mess with some of this stuff without having to worry about it having any effect on anything outside of this one concert. So I'm just scrunching everything together now, making it real small so that it'll fit underneath that one keyboard. So I'm still keeping the order so that I can always sort of have an idea of what's going on if I ever need to. And then what I'm going to do here is click on all of these while holding Command so that I select them all. And I'm going to drag it over, and I'm going to set it so that it's overlapping this knob a little bit, and I'll show you why in a second. So now I'm going to scrunch this in quite a bit, and in a second we're going to space this all out so it'll all make sense. I'm going to scrunch everything in as tight as I can. Basically, you just need the first thing and the last thing to sort of be really close together. I'm going to click and drag over this area, and then while I hold Command on my keyboard, I'm going to click on the background to deselect it. Because if the background's selected, then this won't work. Now that everything's highlighted, I'm going to two-finger click, or control click, or right click on the area, and then I'm going to choose Distribute Centers Horizontally. And then it's going to space them out for me, like that. And then I can drag these in a little bit more. There we go. And we've shrunk these up a good bit. So now I'm going to drag them down, and I'm going to stick them right there. So now if we go here and we choose this stuff, we might be about right to be able to cover it up. Yep, there we go. So we can see that that covered it up nicely. And we don't have to worry about that anymore. So we go over to Perform mode, and we're just fine. Now you can see like a little tiny bit poking out there, and you can play around with that and get that looking as precise or as perfect as you'd like. The other thing to note here as you start to move things around, you've got this little tiny activity monitor right there. This is also part of what powers Tonic, and it's just floating underneath the sustain pedal. So you can drag it back underneath like so, or you can stick it up in the corner. It's really small. It's just a little black dot. It just needs to be somewhere on your workspace, so you can stick it underneath the keyboard is kind of my preferred place to put it. All right, now, sorry Sunday Sounds branding. We're going to take you out for a second. I like to leave this text box just so that we can see what version we're working with, just so that you always know, but you can also delete that. It won't offend me. So I'm going to take that out. All right, now I'm going to go to Shelf Controls here, and we're going to drag in a new keyboard. And let's say that this is a 49 key keyboard. And then I'm going to make this nice and small. I'm just going to stick it right there. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a sustain pedal. Shrink that up. And we'll make this a mod wheel. So then you would just assign your MIDI hardware to this keyboard on screen, just like you did when you assigned the first keyboard. I don't actually have a second keyboard connected to my computer right now, so I'm going to skip that step, but that's what you would do. So now that you've got your second keyboard added, the only thing left to do is just tell which channel strips you want to respond to the second keyboard instead of the first. So let's do this really easily with an extra section sound. So you can create a duplicate of the patch if you might want to be able to use it on both, or if you know you're only going to want to use one sound on the second keyboard, for example, let's say like the synth bass, then you can go ahead and throw that onto the second keyboard. Actually, let's go with this. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to just select the channel strip here, and go to the MIDI input tab in the inspector. And right here in input is the keyboard that channel strip is listening to. So right now it's listening to keyboard 1. You can tell because it's floating over keyboard 1 on in the workspace. If I choose keyboard 2, so now I can play it over here, and when this happens over here, nothing. Now you got to make sure that you have an assignment to both keyboards here in layout mode. Otherwise, if either keyboard is set to all, then both keyboards are going to respond to that, even if they don't appear over the on-screen keyboards. If either is set to all as its MIDI input, then it won't work out how you'd like. So that's how you tell a channel strip or a sound in Sunday Keys to listen to your second keyboard instead of your first. So you can still use Patch Builder to combine this patch with other patches, and you can do this for any sound that you'd like. So some folks like to play their pads on their second keyboard. So if you wanted to do that, you would just go select your sound, go to the channel strip, and change the MIDI input. And that would be it. And so the keyboard names are going to be whatever they're named in layout mode, whatever your keyboard is. So then you'd have your pad up there, and you'd have that over there, able to play your pianos or whatever you wanted without having to worry about your pads. Now, at times, you may want to not only have a different keyboard play your pad sounds, your organ sounds, or whatever you'd like, but you might also want to send that to a different output on your audio interface and to your soundboard. So in order to do that, you would control click or two-finger click or right click on the output section for the channel strip, and then you would change it to a different output on your interface. So you would need an interface with more than 2 outs to do this if you're running stereo. If you're running a mono set, you could use output 1 to send your piano and output 2 for your synths, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, and you'd want to dig into your audio interface user manual and a little bit of the main stage help guide to learn how to do that. Anyways, you'd choose output 3 and 4 or whatever outputs you wanted to send it on. And then the other thing to note when you do this is that for it to be truly isolated, you're not going to get there with just that one change, because any buses that the channel strip uses are still going to output to output 1 and 2. Let me explain what I mean. When I go to the concert level here, I can view all the buses that are in the concert. You can see them all right here, bus 1 through 5, and see that their outputs are set to output 1 and 2. And these are shared between most of the presets in Sunday Keys. So if you had a piano that was using the shimmer bus that was on keyboard 1 and you wanted it to send output 1 and 2, and then you also had a pad that you wanted to use the shimmer bus, but it was set to output 3 and 4, and you'd still hear that pad's shimmer effect on output 1 and 2 because that's what the bus is doing. So in order to get around this, you need to make a modification to the buses at the concert level. Basically, you just select the bus that you need to be able to reference on output 3 and 4 or whatever other output, hit Command-C to copy, and then Command-V to paste. If this is your first time doing so, you'll see a warning about creating a channel strip at the concert level. You can just hit Do Not Show this message again if you're okay with that concept, and hit Create. So it's going to create an exact duplicate of the bus. So it's still going to listen to bus 4 as the input source, and then it's still going to output to 1 and 2. So in order to change this to actually isolate it out from output 1 and 2, you would change the bus number to something else, so an unused bus. If you wanted to just create all 5 again, you might do 6 through 10. So for that to line up, this would be bus 9. And then for it to be isolated, you change the output to output 3 and 4, or whatever your other output was. All right, then when you went back to this patch that you needed to have the isolated output for, let's see, let me remember which one it was. There it is, the worship pad. Instead of sending this to shimmer bus 4, you would send it to shimmer bus 9. And then you'd have to do the same thing for the dotted 8th delay bus that's referenced here. But then ideally you'd have your pad sending to output 3 and 4, and you'd have a duplicate of bus 2 sending to output 3 and 4, and then you'd have your new shimmer bus also sending to output 3 and 4 in such a way that you are able to completely isolate any sound that you'd like so that it's on a separate keyboard and it's on a separate output. Now, you can do the separate output thing that I just described without having to use a second keyboard. You could totally still send your pads out to a different out or whatever instrument and have them all on the same keyboard as well. It's just oftentimes when people want to do one of these things, they also end up wanting to do the other. So that's a really quick overview of how that would work. All right, now we're going to go back to layout mode. And I'm actually going to just revert to the original concert file that we started with after the save. So I'm going to go to File and choose Revert to Saved. We're going to lose all these changes, and that's okay because we just want to talk about some other things for now. So it's going to take just a second for this to load up, and we're going to jump ahead in time. All right, now we're back at the concert as we originally had it. So let's do a couple other things in layout mode. We're just going to add some stuff to our on-screen workspace. Some folks really like to use a CPU meter in main stage, so I'm going to drag a VU meter in here. Basically what this does is it gives you an overview of your CPU usage in main stage via this little reader. Gives you a percentage and then also this little visual reference. Now, previous versions of Sunday Keys actually included a CPU usage meter. We made the decision to stop including it because I found that this isn't the most accurate way to actually assess your CPU usage in main stage. This meter up here at the top, if you double click on it, opens up like this. And it's actually a much more accurate way to gauge your CPU usage. And then your Apple OS system actually has an even more accurate CPU usage meter itself. I found that this, if not utilized with caution, tended to cause alarm unnecessarily. People thinking that they were using more CPU than they had, when in reality it was just the meter not being very accurate. But I understand that some folks understand the risk and they still like to have that little visual reference when they're in perform mode. So in order to set this up, all you do is go to the concert level here in edit mode, click on the VU meter, and then you're going to go to Actions. You're going to scroll down until you see CPU load. And then you'll see that you have this little on-screen reference when in perform mode that gives you an idea of your CPU load. Now, it's not the worst indicator. It will follow the big jumps and the big drops. But it's not always necessarily 100% in sync with what you have up here. And it's often not in sync with your overall CPU usage computer-wide. So I like to discourage folks from using this, but I know that it's popular with some people, so I wanted to address how to add one really quickly. Right now we're going to go back to layout mode, and I'm going to delete that. All right, now let's go ahead and add something that some people might find kind of fun. We're going to add a chord readout. And there's no limitations here other than the ones built into main stage to what you can add to the workspace. If you can find room for it, then you can put it on your workspace in Sunday Keys. So we're going to go to edit mode again here at the concert level. And again, we're going to select the parameter text option there that we added in layout mode. I want to make sure that was clear. It's parameter text, not regular text box. It has to say parameter text. And we're going to go back to edit here. We're going to choose Actions. And we're going to scroll down. Till we see chord display. Now, when you play chords, MainStage will do its best to approximate the chord equivalents to what you're playing. It's not 100% accurate, but it can be helpful if you're a newer keyboard player to be able to see visually on screen sort of what you're putting into MainStage. Now, we're not going to delete this because we're going to use the same box and just change the mapping so that it displays the current time. So this is also under Actions, and it's actually right above Chord Display. So you're going to choose Current Time. If you need to be able to make sure that you're staying on schedule, you can use that right there. There's some other options here that you can use to display the current name of the patch, all sorts of different stuff that you can do. In this Actions folder, there's all sorts of interesting little things that you can set up. Some that you can map to buttons, some that you can use in parameter text like we just did. Like I said a second ago, you can do pretty much anything you want in this space down here at the bottom of Sunday Keys. You're just limited by your creativity and what MainStage 3 is capable of. All right, now lastly, let's talk about changing the overall look and feel of Sunday Keys. We'll talk about changing backgrounds and then really quickly about changing some of the colors of the controls themselves. So you have 4 sections at the top of Sunday Keys here. So when you click on one of these, you'll see them highlighted here. Just be careful that you see the blue outline around the whole section and not one of the text boxes or one of the buttons. When you click on the corner of any of the sections, you should be able to identify it pretty easily. When you've done this, you can go over here in layout mode to the background and you can choose a different background. It's as simple as that to change the aesthetic of Sunday Keys. Now, I'm particularly fond of the default setting, but some people prefer a different vibe. I like to keep things consistent, so if I were going to change something up, I might do something like this. But if you want to, you can color code the sections even more aggressively, if that's going to make it easier for your team. So you can make them the different colors. You can even upload images as your background. So if you're Photoshop savvy and you wanted to put something unique together, you could do that. The default is this little outline option again. So if you want to go back to where you were, you can just choose that outline. So you can change any of the backgrounds in Sunday Keys doing that. There's also a full bleed background that's behind everything. It's just a simple black. You can change the color of that as well. But know that in MainStage 3.3, there are some glitches with the background at times that will present themselves. So you'll run into, at times, not always, different backgrounds will be stamped underneath the full bleed background, which may not be what you want. In most cases, it isn't what you want. But right now, it looks like it's working great. So this is a quick way to change the whole feel of Sunday Keys by just grabbing a new background and running with it. So that's really easy way for you to make some changes. And then if you need to change the color of something, you can do so. The darker backgrounds are going to work a lot better with the text that's in the sections. So it's just something to keep in mind. Not that you couldn't change that text, but it will take you a lot of time if you plan to use all of the Sunday Keys presets. So anyways, really quick and easy way to make big aesthetic changes. If you want to change the color of any of the sections, you can do so. The best way to do this for a whole section is to hold Command on your keyboard, and click on every control. And then you can change the color here under Appearance. So if you wanted it to be pink, there you go. Now, I don't know, unless you have a really good reason to do so, I wouldn't recommend moving away from color coding because it works with Patch Builder really nicely, and even all the channel strips themselves in Sunday Keys are color coded. But if you have your own system in place, you can totally do that. You can also change the appearance of the workspace at the patch level. So if you ever wanted to have a single patch for whatever reason really catch your volunteers' attention, you can click on any of the backgrounds. So I'm going to grab the whole background on this patch, and then I'm going to choose Custom Background, and then I can choose a different one. Yeah, just helpful to have in your back pocket if there were ever a scenario where you needed to really easily be able to capture yourself or your volunteers' attention. If there was some visual cue that you needed to send, this might be a quick way to do that. It does take a little, like half a second to switch to that different background. At times I've been a little worried that it increases CPU strain during that little bit of time, but it seems that on the current version of MainStage, it's a pretty negligible amount of CPU usage. And if you wanted to undo that, you would just deselect the custom background button there. So that's how you can make some aesthetic changes to Sunday Keys. Like I said, you can even use Photoshop and design your own background if you like, and then load that in here by clicking Image and then choosing an image. For more inspiration about modifications you can make to Sunday Keys, we actually have some more videos produced that we've released over in the Sunday Keys user community on Facebook. So if you head over to the Sunday Keys group and search for #SKMods, then you'll find some videos that we've done about making changes, both sound design and freeing up space in the template. Some of these videos are a little bit older, so the layout is a little different, but the principles of what you can do and things you can add or take away are the same. All right, so In the next video, we're going to talk about troubleshooting. Even if you haven't run into any issues so far, it's a great idea to check out the video before you need it, so that if and when you run into an issue, you might be able to resolve it right there in the moment. We'll see you in the next video.